America, we stand for freedom. Though freedom is never really free, we yearn and strive for government protecting our liberty.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Your Right to Know, brought to you by the Fitchburg Republican City Committee. I'll be your co-host with my co-host, Mary Lotze, and tonight we're going to be talking about the economics of socialism. Tonight for our guest we have a longtime friend and a longtime guest on our show, Elmer Eubanks, professor of economics and chair of the business department at Mount Wachusett Community College. Now, a few months ago, we did a program on socialism, and it was a very important, timely, and interesting program in light of the 2020 election. And the preponderance of the Democratic candidates currently wanting to become president, espousing a move towards socialism and the development of their policies, platforms, and plans should they become president of the United States. Top 5 candidates are the former Vice President Joe Biden, Senator Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris, Mayor Pete Buttigieg, I don't know, and entrepreneur and businessman Andrew Yang. They support numerous programs that are so socialistic, there's a fear that the country will become bankrupt, just like Venezuela. So where is the money going to come from to afford these giveaways? Tonight we're going to discuss the economics of socialism with our returning guest and instructor, Elmer Eubanks. Elmer, please tell our viewers your views a bit about your background and as it relates to fleeing your homeland of Nicaragua in 1979.
So actually I was born in Costa Rica, but we lived in Nicaragua.
Oh, excuse me. Yep.
And my grandfather's from there actually, so it's still a homeland for us to a certain extent. We lived there for about 3 years. We came there in the 76, around 76, 78 I believe. And the first thing we got there, they had all the, they had a strike. So we couldn't find food for like 30 days.
Oh wow! And
so that's one of the memories that I have in my head, that we were like literally without any food, and whatever we brought with us when we moved to Nicaragua. We were living in Guatemala at the time. So when we got there, a year later in '79, we ended up having to leave, and luckily my 2 sisters were born here in the U.S., so the U.S. Embassy flew us out. So actually we left a couple days after the Sandinistas took over, and we flew out in a Hercules plane to Panama, and from there I went to school in Costa Rica. But my dad went back, and one of the things that we discussed, or we've been discussing in our home that happened, is that the first thing they did, the Sandinistas did, was take away their property rights. So the Sandinistas were socialists, yeah. Mm-hmm. And they started, obviously they started with their, a lot of pressure on the government by, striking and, trying to push back on everything they could until they finally, Somoza left and, they took over the country.
Now, just as a quick question for you, similar to what happened in Venezuela, were firearms rights removed?
Oh yeah. I mean, they took away the people's rights to own firearms, which they were, or initially they were all had firearms because they were in the revolution fighting the Somoza's National Guard, right? Okay. So they took those away. Then the second thing they do, they took away property rights. So they decided. So one of the things that my dad was the president of a Seventh-day Adventist mission there, and the mission owned hospitals and clinics and also churches. And the first thing they did was take away the churches. Then they took away the hospitals and they took away the clinics. So now the clinics and the hospitals are now government property.
Run.
Then they went and started looking at whoever owned land, and they'd say, well, you have a lot of land, so we're going to take it away and we're going to divide it up amongst everybody in this town. Then they took, if you had 2 cars, they took away your car, and you leave you with 1 car. The other car belongs to the state now. If you had 2 homes, they took away one of your homes. and now you don't have another home, and you lost your second home. So people used to have a home in the capital and maybe in Corn Islands or Bluefields, which is like a little paradise over there, little islands.
More rural.
More rural. It was an English-speaking section of Nicaragua, but it's an island, Corn Island, and Little Corn, and then Bluefields is primarily English-speaking, which they fought the Sandinistas quite a bit because they were kind of they're more of a British kind of enclave. But that was the first thing they do. They take away your rights, so you don't own anything anymore. It's not yours. You may have sweat and tears to get to own a property, and they take it away. But one of the things that my dad was telling the organization that he was with was that the hospital should transfer ownership to become a national before they took over. He said because these guys are communists. They're going to take away all your rights. So they didn't listen, and they didn't transfer the board to local residents. And so the first thing they did was they said that's a foreign entity that owns that, so that's now a national. So they took a huge, nice, really hospital, 150 bed, I think, in Esteli, and they took that away. Then they took the clinics in Bluefields. He had built clinics in Bluefields and other regions of the country. They got some of the clinics back and the churches back because he had moved all the control of the boards to each organization to local individuals. So everybody was Nicaraguan. And so he was able to recover that way. But if anything that had anybody on the board that was a foreigner, it was gone. And then of course they nationalized the electricity, they nationalized everything was now nationalized. So it becomes property of the state. And their idea is that, well, it's better for all of us because we're all going to share in everything, right? So if you have land, and Nicaragua has a lot of land with not a lot of people, so you have a huge vast of land. So they said, well, if we divide it up, we're going to all have a piece. So now everybody had their little piece of land, but they would grow a little bit of food, but it's not enough to sustain themselves, and it's also not enough to sell to anybody else. So they were starving. So it goes from one extreme to the other, and the government control of taking over all aspects of your life is really the challenge there. And so when you look at it, when you look back, they started to take away those rights, and so you don't have any rights anymore, and you can't fight them because the government controls it. So they take away your guns, they take away your house, they take away everything, because now we're all sharing this. We're all in this together. It's all of ours. We're not taking it away from you. It's still yours, but it's now ours. We're sharing it, right?
So what happened to the economy when that happened?
So the economy, initially everybody was all enthusiastic because they had won the war, and initially it seemed like it would go well, but then it turned south after a few years, because obviously what happens is who wants to work if you're not getting paid what you're worth, and who wants to, if you don't own anything, eventually people didn't want to do anything. And if the government's taking care of you, then why work? Why bother?
And obviously if you did have a job, the wages drastically plummeted.
Yeah, the wages dropped.
Plummet, but it didn't matter what skill level you brought to the table, you were going to make the same.
Whatever the government decided, yeah. Right. So you're all equal, so we're all going to have equal rights, and we're all going to have we're all going to share in the wealth. So the thing is, the first people that end up leaving, that left, like we left, like a lot of the people, my friends that owned farms, they took off, they moved to Miami, because they had, and if you owned a factory or a means of production, you left. You took off, grabbed as much money as you could, and get the heck out of there. So that whole sucks all the energy out, and they can't. They're not producing anymore because it's not worth it for them to produce anything. You're manufacturing something, and now you have to sell it for the price of the government. That was another thing, they put price controls. So now you can't sell things, and you have to put it at the price that the government decides it's going to be. So that also affects the economy.
So if there's a scarcity of, say, apples, okay, they can only sell, even though there's only a few select apples anymore, you can only sell it. So
at whatever price
the government said.
And so it may cost you more to go collect those apples, because you got to pay people. and now you got to sell it for less than what you produced it at. So what do? You just say, well, I'm not doing this anymore, and I get up and leave. And so that's what basically happened. So you had a lot of exodus of people. The same thing has been happening in Venezuela. People just like pick up and leave. The people that have the means get up and leave. And yeah, so if you're able to get up and leave, you leave immediately. I mean, we left, I think it was a few days after. And we lived, my house was at the bottom of a hill, and the U.S. Embassy, I could see it from my house. And my neighbor was the vice president of the country. So, you know, I would talk to some of the guys in the mill that were guarding him as a kid, and I was like, you know, some of them were actually Sandinistas, that they were ready to take over as soon as they won, they flipped sides. And they're protecting the vice president. But Somoza left. And as soon as he left, you know, everybody started like exodus out of the country. So the people that had the means, if you could get on a plane and maybe have your own helicopter, get across the border, you know, everybody. Those are the people that took off.
You know, one of the things that I was reading and doing some preparation work for this is that they likened socialism and the initial takeover to a Ponzi scheme, because they said initially it looks good. People are excited about the possibility of all of this free stuff or things being easy. The government will always take care of you. But then after a couple of years, when the total reality sets in, it is like a Ponzi scheme. All of a sudden it caves in on itself.
Right, it does. Eventually it does. I mean, they could probably drag it on a little bit. And what helped Nicaragua come back is that they actually went back to some sort of, like they took some of the socialism away, and they went back to sort of like what China's been doing, kind of moved to more of a, you know, mixed economy where the government still controls some items, but like the utilities and that kind of stuff. But then they allowed free markets, and then the economy got better again, and people started to think, well, maybe, you know, I can own property again. So, you know, Ortega now has been able to kind of dance that dance without having to, because he moved to a little bit more of a capital, with still some restrictions, but they moved to more of a capitalistic society. So with some of the socialist, well, the controls, because they control everybody. I mean, it's an interesting thing, because they set up each city, each block has a ward captain, and they basically, you know, rat on each other.
Right, yeah, very very close control.
Very close control. So you can't escape from the controlling eyes of the government, because everybody is ready to tell on you if you're not towing the line of the government. And so they do it block by block. They organize. It's really interesting how they have organized this. So each block has a captain, each block has, you know, the groups, and they meet and they, you know, decide what's going to happen, and then they start coercing people too. And once they can't get their way, you know, by laws and that, then they start arresting people, putting you in prison, killing you if you don't follow what they want. So that's where they move from. They can't control you anymore. So now they're going to control you through, and you can't defend yourself. You don't have guns anymore.
Right.
You just you have no way of defending yourself.
You're fearful for your children.
Right. So you end up that's where it moves to eventually, and that's the same thing that's happening in Venezuela. The means of production dry up, and everything is free for everybody for a while until there's no more money.
Right.
Well, and once the money's gone, then...
And that's one of the things that I was looking at. A couple of things. When Andrew and I did the show on socialism, one of the fearful things about Venezuela is, and for our viewers, this can really happen in a few years. This isn't like going to take... We can't sit here and say, oh, it took 500 years for the United States to fall. It's Venezuela, and now you're talking about Nicaragua. We're talking a handful of years, 10 years.
Right,
and your total texture, or the freedom you have in your country is gone. It's diminished.
And maybe
it's lost.
It'll take a little bit longer here, because we value that freedom, and I'm hoping that some of our younger generation don't think that because it's free that they're going to be, you know, and that's the challenge. Like really trying to, they're buying into this whole idea that, hey, I'll have free this and free that, free education.
Well, and so I just want to throw some of these statistics out. You probably know them, but for our viewers, and these are just, so these are sort of estimates, but they're not far off estimates. So our Democratic candidates, this is where we're going. and Andrew listed the top 5, and this is pretty common among all 17 or however many are left as of today. But so they want to, if you were to get rid of our current healthcare system and went to a one-size-fits-all healthcare system, universal healthcare, the taxpayers would be, that would be a $3.2 trillion a year hit. $3.2 trillion. So then we'll just say the Green New Deal. Now, we had a lot about the Green New Deal and the UN and everything, a 16-year-old or 12-year-old girl speaking about the Green New Deal. That's going to estimate to be cost $9.3 trillion a year. So we just had $3.2 trillion, $9.3 trillion. Free college tuition, which sounds good to every young person. It even sounds good for parents.
Yeah.
You're both parents. It sounds good for you.
Yeah, if I don't have to pay for my
so that's going to cost. This is a cheap one. This is $125 billion a year. So, you know, we're getting cheaper here as we go. But then we have Andrew Yang and his freedom dividend, or the Universal Basic Income, UBI. That's estimated to cost another $2.8 billion, or trillion, excuse me, $2.8 trillion a year. So right away, with just those 4 items, we're looking at $15 trillion a year. Now, again, and Elmer, I want you to talk about this a little bit, because we have both Senator Elizabeth Warren, who's talking about her, what is it, 2%ers, wealthy 2%. She wants to go after them for money.
I believe
and then we have Bernie Sanders, who wants to go for 1%, but then he has some other offsets that will bring in money. Those both programs, again, estimated $25 to $75 billion a year they will bring in.
And that won't even cover the college program.
That's not even a drop in a bucket.
That doesn't cover.
Over $15 trillion a year for these other programs. So please explain where this money's coming from.
I think that's the challenge. It's going to come out of our pockets, right?
Well,
until they bleed us dry, and then there's no more pockets to get money from. So they'll print more money probably, like they did in Germany.
And then we've got and what does that bring but superinflation or hyperinflation?
Right. And then everything is causing Andrew, what's his name? Andrew Yang. He has an interesting one, which if you look back, I mean, that's kind of going back to very socialism, but where everybody has an equal income. And then what's your incentive anymore? If I can get up from bed and not have to go to work, and I'm going to get guaranteed, what is it, $1,000 per person or something like that? Per month, then what's my incentive to go to work?
Yep, so $12,000 a year across the board, and it doesn't matter if you're Bill Gates,
everybody gets,
or if you're Mary Lotze, you will get $12,000 a year.
So the 1% or 2%ers that get taxed, the benefit that they get is they get an extra $12,000.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
so that's.
But that shows this. What you were talking about, Elmer, is that everybody gets it. Everybody shares.
Right, and so we have to take it away from the rich to be able to give it to everybody so that we can share it. But you know, you have to go back and look, where are the rich actually getting their money, right? It's not like they just woke up one day and had a lot of money. They may have had some resources from their parents or whatever, but you know, it's the freedom that we have to make choices. The freedom that our mode of economy allows us to make decisions on our own. If I want to go to work and make more money, I do that, right? I have that incentive to do that. And if you take away that incentive, then you know nobody's going to. There won't be any rich people. We won't have any of them to tax. Well, so we want to have some of them so we can tax them, but we don't tax them so that we don't have any. I mean, and our system really creates a system that we have is if we create, you know, the rich are creating more jobs. Because the way we tax people, we tax employment. So if we get more people working, that's really the crux of our economy.
And we have under 4%. Under 4%.
Yeah. So all these people are paying into the tax system, and it'll bring down our debt, right? And more people can go into the economy.
Not only do we have under 4% unemployment, but we have minorities. Minority unemployment.
That's gone down.
That's gone down tremendously.
African American unemployment is way down. Hispanic unemployment is way down. So not only do we have a very low unemployment rate, but amongst the different sectors, we have a very positive employment rate.
So if you look at it, what really brings more equality is our system where we can actually freely participate in an economy, where nobody has to force me to work or to do work for free,
right,
basically for others. So that system that we have, it allows us that freedom to go and create something, to make something from my hands, and then have somebody else buy it from me.
To find value.
To find value in it. That's you take that away from people.
Well,
you look at Cuba, look at their cars. They're still running the cars from the 60s.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and that's the sort of economic incentive that is lost with socialism.
Right.
And not only an economic incentive is lost, but the human incentive is lost.
That's the biggest thing I think that you lose. Initially, everybody seems happy. Oh yeah, we're all happy. We're all going to be contributing and sharing. But once that starts to dry out, then there's no incentive for you to do anything. So why even bother going out, getting out of bed to go to work? And so then they have to force you to do it, right? Then they have to put a gun to your head and say you're going to work, or else we're going to kill you.
Work camps,
right?
Exactly. In essence. So, with these stats, please discuss the downside of a socialist economy on economic growth. What about on the current national debt, which we continue to hear is being over like $22.5 trillion? At what point does the United States become a debtor nation?
Well, we already are. We're already moved, in the last 8 years that we had of Obama, that's where we went. We began to borrow to support all these social programs. And so we're just now starting to come out of it because we have, unemployment. We have people, the employment rate has gone down, and so now we have less unemployment than we had before. Mm-hmm. And so those people are now paying into the system. So we should, over time, start to reduce our tax burden because we have incentive to work again. We're not getting a free ride anymore. Free housing, free phone. That's where we're headed. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people woke up and said, "Wait, that's why we want Trump." It's like we're going to just drive ourselves down into the ground because everything's free. You want to be on welfare? Okay, you can sit at home. We'll give you a cell phone. We'll give you free housing and
now $12,000 free every year.
Add what Yang wants to put in.
What would be the difference in a guaranteed income? And every once in a while, different presidents have given like a financial incentive for people, maybe $1,000 once an administration, like 4 years, to stimulate the economy. So I guess that's the benefit of it's supposed to stimulate the economy.
Yeah, because we're spending, right?
But is it a stimulant, really?
I don't think. I mean, we saw that when they did the Cars for Clunkers,
right.
And they gave some, even when President Bush gave money back in taxes,
right.
It really wasn't enough to lift everybody back up. So, what did a lot of people do was like, I'll just hold on to the money because
pay a bill.
Right?
And paying a bill does not stimulate the economy.
Yeah, it didn't allow me to buy anything.
Right.
And move the economy. So it was a small incentive too. It wasn't big enough to really push things.
Wasn't it like $1,000?
It was something like that. Didn't we get $250 once even?
Some of us got like 100 or 200.
Right.
So it wasn't a lot. But supposedly that was going to stimulate the economy. So that's kind of a socialist view too. We went that path to kind of move the economy, which we could have done a lot better with other incentives that would have been, So I'd like to see more incentives around the line of like, if you get more skills, then you can pay me more. So then I'll be making more money. And even a minimum wage is another one that they tend to be pushing a lot.
Sure, a $15 minimum wage. Now, doesn't a $15, so I will give everyone who is currently making under $15, I'll bring them up to $15. But then, wouldn't you want more money?
Right. Because of why, I have skills. I've worked, 5 years to make it to 15, and now this, somebody comes in with no skills and they're going to start at 15, and I'm still at 15. And so what do people do? They quit.
Right.
They're like, well, I'll quit that job, and why am I going to work for minimum wage? It doesn't
Why
make
will I
sense.
take the supervisory job for $15 when I can come in as the entry level and get $15?
Right, exactly. So you're like, I'm not. There's no incentive. And the funny thing with minimum wage is that it actually cut into the amount of people that are actually getting more. They're getting less money, because now they're not working full-time anymore.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They've been cut back because the company that had 2 people working now have to split that. If I want to keep them working, I'm going to have to split that.
Right.
50
Yeah. Now instead of 2 people working full-time, you have
1
2
working
people
part-time.
Part-time.
Yeah.
Right.
So they can't afford it. And it puts pressure up on our costs too.
Yeah.
So giving $1,000 initially is great, because we all got $1,000 to spend. But over time, that $1,000 will get eaten up with inflation, because it'll just get eaten up, because now that I know that you have $1,000,
right, I
can charge you more for that burger. I can charge you more so eventually it disappears too. So it's not a real incentive. It's a temporary, like a temporary.
Right. I mean, a lot of you hear this push for 15 for the minimum wage, but people aren't understanding that you take your kid to the McDonald's to get a Happy Meal. That Happy Meal is going to go up significantly,
right,
as a result of the guy making it now making $15 an hour.
Plus, my kid's not going to get a job anymore.
Right.
To get any skills, because I can't, who's going to hire them?
Well, that was always traditionally these entry-level jobs, the McDonald's, those kind of jobs. They were always there to give people more of a introduction to work ethic, and not to
and you don't have, not
support
to
a family.
Support them, exactly. And that's where people get stuck. And it really comes back to, how do we become more productive? And that's where we really make the difference. If we can figure out how to be, and that's why people become creative and invent a new machine that makes something a lot faster. We've done that throughout all these ages. We put a lot of people to work, because Ford did it, right? Mm-hmm. And he paid more. He said, well, I'm going to pay $5. And that was incredible at that time,
and that
right?
was the beginning of the Industrial Revolution.
Just to be able to put people to work, and people are out of work. I mean, it's like, so that concept of coming up with creating new ways or new methods, you take away that incentive, and then you destroy the economy. As you find solutions to things that, we brought a lot of stuff back from China to the U.S. because of our creativity, because we're able to create new equipment that can do stuff that we had to do manually before. Now we have robots doing it, right? So the more creative we can be and more efficient, then we change the dynamics, and we can prosper more and make more money.
Would you believe our half hour is over already?
It always goes by quick.
It just goes by so quickly. This is a very interesting topic, and it shows why when we go to the polls to vote, it's not voting for the person we want to have a beer with. It's voting for the person who can keep us as a free nation where we have liberty. And because of that, I'd like to thank Elmer for joining us. And we thank you for watching Your Right to Know and sitting in here tonight with the Fitchburg Republican City Committee. As we leave you, we want you to remember that your local or city or town Republican Committee is your only grassroots organization that supports and holds dear your liberty, your constitutional rights, and conservative values. We'd like you to join us. Why? Because to us, GOP stands for growth, opportunity, and prosperity for all people, and we always stand for freedom. Thank you and good night.
America, we stand for freedom, so let us all unite to yearn and strive for our republic that reflects our values, that preserves our rights, and goes forth in power and might, that reflects our values and preserves our rights, and goes forth in power and might.